Welcome back to Sneaker Impact News. I'm your host, Bryan the Botanist, and today we have a very special interview with Ted Metellus, the race director of the New York City Marathon and Senior Vice President of Event Development and Production at the New York Road Runners, NYRR. Welcome, Ted. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We also have the legendary Frankie Ruiz, race director of the Miami Marathon, in the house. Frankie, how's it going?
Always good when I get to see Ted and Bryan on a screen.
Yep. A beautiful day here in Miami. Ted, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from the great city of New York. I'm here in Manhattan, actually not far from where many runners have run at the Armory in Wash Heights.
We're so honored to have you as a guest today. Thank you, Frankie, for setting this up. Sneaker Impact is doing a pilot program with the New York Road Runners RUNCenter in Manhattan, Ted. What do they do at the RUNCenter?
The RUNCenter is a multi-purpose space in partnership with New Balance. It's the Run Hub. So we have our bib pickup is happening there. Many of our community gatherings are happening there. Our coaches meet there as well. And we have the New Balance store that's in the space as well. So folks can get their last minute items and equipment prior to starting with race day. So it's a fairly heavily used space. We're open 7 days a week, morning to evening, particularly because we have runners that come by, use our lockers, use our restrooms, and head up a couple of blocks to Central Park. Great to have the Sneaker Impact box there and the branding there and the messaging that's tied to it, since so many of the athletes come in there, see that and say, okay, great, the next time I'm coming back inside for one of the Road Runners races, I can drop off a gently pair of used shoes.
That's incredible. We're so honored. New York Road Runners is one of my favorite organizations in the U.S. I ran the New York City Marathon in 2010, and I was scheduled to run it in 2012, but the world had other plans. Yeah. And the city of New York pulled together through that like they always do. But before we get into all the questions we have thought of over the last couple of weeks about what we think of the dream job, tell us where were you born and how did that affect your identity?
I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised, first generation. My parents are from Haiti. My siblings are from Haiti. They came to this country in the 60s. My siblings came in the 70s. I was born. And being a New Yorker is amazing because of just the multiculturalism of New York and the diversity of this city. You mentioned the resilience of this city as well, seeing the city go through so much and navigate through so much as a community. So it's great. It's great to be able to be a part of this city. It's always been home. I've spent some time in South Florida living in Miami. I spent some time in Philly. I've traveled across the country and across the world, but New York is home.
That's incredible. What were you like as a kid? Did you have any brothers and sisters? Were you a runner? Did you play sports?
Yeah, so I have two brothers and an older sister. I'm the youngest of the four of us here. My brothers played soccer and ran. I ran in high school for a couple of years at my high school, Hollows High School in the Bronx. And I was always active because I think that was the cool thing during that time. Like video games and smartphones and all that stuff weren't a thing back in the 80s. It was running and biking and dancing and music and hanging out on the block and playing handball and stickball. So it was always being active, and having that as a part of like my growing up was great. And having parents that were willing and open to be like, hey, go out there and play, go out, have fun, play with your friends, do your thing, stay out of trouble. And staying out of trouble always tied back to being in activities and programs.
So you had active parenting and the community was supportive, and you started running in high school or in middle school?
No, I started running in high school. Like many kids, I wanted to play on the basketball team. I wasn't tall enough or agile enough to be able to do that. And our cross-country coach and track coach was smart enough to always stand out by the basketball courts and say to the kids, hey, why don't you come? You want to join a team sport? Come join this team sport. You want to engage with folks? Come engage with these folks. You want to push yourself and experience something new and different? Come join the track team here. So I did that for a handful of years, and it was pretty instrumental when you think about running in Van Cortlandt Park and some of the different tracks around New York, competing against different teams in the New York tri-state area, and the unity and partnership that it created.
That's really cool. I'm sure you've seen a lot of growth in the running world, and from New York City in general is one of the running capitals, special place. How did you get started in the events world and in the running industry?
I'll answer you this way. So when I went to college, I went to a state university, Oswego, SUNY Oswego, which is 45 minutes north of Syracuse, so way upstate New York. And while I was there, I wanted to make the most of the time that I was in school. And I realized that there's a ton of programs and activities that were there, and I decided to partake in them. One of them was concerts and special events. So bringing up acts, bringing up shows, and learning the kind of behind the scenes planning of an event and an experience. So I was heavily involved in student government, heavily involved in student programming in particular. And that springboarded me into the professional space and working in broadcast and radio and marketing. And my first exposure to the endurance space was after working in the nonprofit space, producing cycling events that raised money for AIDS and walks that raised money for breast cancer. So I learned that large scale planning and logistics. And one of my colleagues that I worked with prior to was at New York Roadrunners, working for the marathon, reached out to me in 2001 and said, hey, listen, we're really desperate need of some talent. Can you come on board and give us a hand working on that marathon? That marathon had significance. It was 2 months after 9/11. The city and the world were really in a state and needed something to bring people together. And it was my first experience to the endurance space there. I got that taste in 01 and I never stopped.
Wow. So this was back around 9/11. So this is over 20 years ago.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Okay. And this was in New York. So I don't want to move too quick, but I know you have history in Florida.
Yeah.
And that's where Frankie and I are based right now. And I know you and Frankie go back pretty far. So I don't know, Frankie, if you want to take over in this moment or if you want me to keep going, but we want to talk about the Miami Marathon. Yeah, Frankie, and you want to ask Ted some questions?
You're doing great, but I am going to say a couple things because I love when things come full circle. It reminds you that, I don't know, somebody a lot smarter than us is in charge. But whether it's chance or not, the fact that I'm on a call with Ted and he's the race director of the most popular endurance sport in the world is pretty awesome because he was connected to Miami, and I love all things that somehow or another touch Miami. And I know Ted still has a heart for Miami because it comes back to us at least for the races, and I'm sure he comes back here and there because he's got some Miami blood in him, I think. But no, I did want to ask Ted just a general question is in relation to that. What are the main differences you feel an event like the New York City Marathon and Miami Marathon, since you've had a hand in it? For those that don't know, Ted actually was the director here in Miami for, Ted, it was about a year and a half?
A year and a half, interim window, yeah.
Yeah, so Miami left his mark, or he left his mark in Miami and vice versa. We still load trucks the way that Ted taught us to load trucks and produce races. But anyhow, Ted, I was just curious, what are the main differences between an event like that and an event maybe in Miami that's half its age?
Well, I don't see things as in what it doesn't have, but more along the lines of what it does have. And I think that's been what's really fascinating. I was down in South Florida in Miami 07, 08, and I actually ran my first my first marathon ever in 08. I was training, I was running, and I was doing everything while living down in Miami and South Florida when we were all working together at the Miami Marathon office, producing a portfolio of road races and events that we had down there. I see more similarities than I see differences. Obviously, you have two different markets, different times of the year, and so on and so forth. But what I do see the similarities is around the community of running and the engagement of it and the growth of it. I wasn't in New York during the early years with Alan Steinfeld and Fred LeBeau and Vince Chapetta and Ted Corbett when they were growing that event. But I was in Miami when Frankie Ruiz, Gabby Pozo, Robert Pozo, and the team collectively as a family, literally as a family, and still is, because I know your dad is still involved, Paco Ruiz, who I love so much, and the family is still connected. To watch that similar DNA in South Florida and in Miami, which was what made New York and makes New York what it is. It is community. It is a family. It is an engagement. It is a alignment of the sport and activity of running and the inspiration of it. The fact that there's a huge youth component that's tied to the Miami Marathon. We have a similar component that's here. And you guys are great because you're doing it on race day. So those kids get a chance to truly experience that firsthand. I think one of the other big things too, which has been really amazing to see, Frankie, so you and the team do an amazing job of this, is marketing it. We used to heavily market in the US and looking in Florida and looking so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, how about we go international? We have so many people that come in from South America. We have so many people coming in from other parts of the world that want to come to this amazing city, Miami, and experience what Miami is all about. Then let's showcase that. Let's go to these markets. Let's go to these expos. Let's get people to come out and see this event firsthand. And now the international flair and flavor of that event is truly seen there. And again, paralleling New York, 40% of our race fields from overseas.
That's true.
Yeah. So wow. I think there are so many comparisons and connections there. And it was beautiful to be there to see the race grow to a point that it now sells out. That's amazing. Think about that, Frankie. When we were back at the old office and you were upstairs and I was downstairs, we're working so hard to get registration up and get our numbers up and see what we can get, to now having an event that sells out in a matter of months.
So I want to run it and I can't get in.
You got to know the right people, baby.
Out of respect for Frankie, he's one of the most popular guys in Miami with the Brickell Run Club, and you're probably his soul brother in New York City. So it's a lot of commonalities there. My question is similar to Frankie's. What did you learn in Miami and then with the Miami Marathon that you took to New York to help run the Big Apple?
Wow, what I learned from Miami. So I will share one thing, and you mentioned it briefly with the Brickell Run Club. Frankie was one of the first people I knew, and this is 06, 07, 08, when he was really building the community running component. Hey, let's all meet at this location. Let's all go for a run. Let's do this. Let's do that. And there were parts of this that existed back with Raven Run on the beach and whatnot. Yep. So there was a little bit of that lived there, but Frankie really elevated that with that culture exactly, and getting that piece that was there. And to watch that grow to what it is right now. Frankie, and New York Roadrunners, we have over 250 clubs that are part of our organization. And that's not counting crews and different communities that are tying in that. Frankie was one of the original Dandadas going way back in the day in that piece there. So if there was a thing that I learned and took from my time in Miami, is that embracing of running in community on the ground. And one last thing that I'll say really quickly about Frankie, I remember we went out once and we were doing some recruitment to the marathon, and we went to a business and we were talking to some folks and talking to some people that, Frankie, the thing we always used to hear all the time, oh, I can never run a marathon. I can never run a half marathon. That's so far. I can barely do a mile, and so on and so forth. And we sat there and we help inspire people, which is something that's in both of our DNAs, help inspire people to the power of running and the community of running. But one of the things that Frankie said years ago that I still say to this day is running's the only sport that you'll be on the same field as some of the greatest athletes in the world. Mm-hmm. So I would never be on the same court as LeBron James or on the same court as Kevin Durant, but I can run the same race as Eliud Kipchoge. So I think that's one of the things that Frankie said once, and it sticks to me, and it's so true, is you are going to participate in something that the greatest and fastest in the world and the first timers are experiencing.
How does New York City's run scene compare to Miami?
I think I said it just a moment ago in watching that growth in that running community and how instrumental Frankie was in that space and really championing the engagement of it. And again, this is way before Frankie. You're here, you can speak to it. It's before social media was what it was. It's all word of mouth. It's all getting the community together. It was always linked to local businesses that were there. Hey, let's meet down at Brickell. Let's go to this run here. Let's meet down in South Beach at the Nike store there. So we always had that component that was tied to it. And it's really interesting to see how much it's grown now and like what the incentives now are around it. Hey, this is a great place to meet people. There's a whole lot of talk about dating now because of that. Frankie was doing that years ago. So I think that I think there's a universal component that's tied to the community running scene and how it all engages. And I think from a business perspective, which is genius, is great. You're meeting here every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday to go out and do 3 miles, 5 miles, and whatnot. There's this race that's going on at the end of January, beginning of February, and you should run the Miami Marathon. You should run the half marathon. And then the same thing is happening here with our portfolio of road races and events. Wow, this was great. Where can I get this again? Oh, I could do this at a New York Roadrunners event. I can come out and run our events and races, or I could build up and say, hey, I want to be able to do the marathon or one of our half marathons or a 10-miler that we have this weekend. So I think it's all connecting back to keeping people active, moving, and healthy.
Can you describe your role at a high level of what you do on a day-to-day basis as the race director of the New York City Marathon?
I think the easiest thing for a layperson to hear and understand is I am the project manager for the marathon. And in that role as project manager, you're doing all of the moving pieces and parts. One, I have a team of about 50 people that are in the events department themselves that then interconnect to all of the different departments within the organization. It's working with city agencies and partners, ensuring that we have all the logistics set for the planning of the event itself, what's being communicated to the participants, what the participants are going to experience, ensuring that we have a safe and logistically sound event, which is paramount. Those are the things that go into there. Always planning a year, if not 2 years in advance. Like, we're 45 days out for this year's marathon, but I'm already thinking about 2025's marathon, let alone 2026's marathon, which is going to be significant because the 2026 marathon is the 50th anniversary of the 5-borough marathon. So the first New York City Marathon was in 1970, which was just loops in the park. 1976 is when we took it to Staten Island and ran through all 5 boroughs. And then from that, really blew up the endurance running events in major markets. So Berlin, London, Chicago, all of these cities were like, wait, if New York can do it, we could do it as well. So there's a lot of thinking and a lot of logistics and a lot of partnership and a lot of engagement. It's a lot of alignment, making sure that everybody's on the same page, going the same direction, and understanding roles and responsibilities.
So I'm gonna jump in and say something there in relation to his answer. The cool thing about Ted, and this is, I want to make sure this stays on Ted here. The cool thing about Ted is that there is nobody that Ted is probably responsible for or overseeing or supervising or as the head honcho that can turn around and say, you don't understand, because Ted is probably going to respond and say, I've done that. I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through, whether it's like we joked around loading a truck or picking up goo packets after a race. 100%. We've done it all. And that's what's really cool about a leader that is in a place now where he still stays humble. But part of the reason he stays humble is because he knows where he came from, right? He came from doing all that stuff. And that makes you, I think, one of the best in a leadership capacity. So I love that. You're in the role you're in, Ted.
Frankie paid me a great compliment once. I think it actually...
Only once? I've only complimented
Let me finish the sentence, bro. It actually is on my LinkedIn page. It's one of the greatest compliments that I got from him, which is Ted Metellus leads from the front.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, that says it all right there. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do, or more than likely haven't done already once before.
That's powerful. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Frankie, for that too. So the New York Road Runners is a mission-driven nonprofit with the aim of building healthier lives and stronger communities through the transformative power of running. And the New York Road Runners serves communities across New York City for 70 years, making running more inclusive and accessible, serving all ages, genders, abilities, backgrounds year-round with 60 adult and youth races and programs and events, including the crown jewel, the TCS New York City Marathon, which has 50,000 runners, Ted?
Yeah, over 50,000.
Over 50,000. Yeah, I remember doing it in 2010, and it was 30 to 35 degrees. We all had our gloves and our hats, and there was some wind, but some years it's nice. I've watched it on TV for a good 10 times. It's televised nationally, right?
Yes, nationally and internationally on ESPN. And I think even Telemundo. So we're on a global scale, but again, it reflects the people that run.
And you have some really nice weather. I didn't mean to scare people with that. So it depends on what Mother Nature has in store.
What we want is a low in the 50s. So we want it to be like 45, 55 in that sweet spot.
Okay.
No wind.
That's
no
the perfect
rain,
temperature. 45 to 55.
If you give me that right there, we're in business. That's what I'm praying for.
It's so epic.
You just described the coldest day in Miami history.
That's true.
I remember that race and I was there.
That's right. Yeah.
I just remember the starting line on the Verrazano Bridge, the load in. That year, I did it with Runners Depot, one of our partners out of Broward, and they were connected with ASICS. So I was part of the ASICS. I got a bus from my hotel. It was my first time doing New York City Marathon. They took us from the hotel to the fort. Is it called a fort?
Yep.
And we hung out there for 3 hours or so, 2 to 3 hours. But I heard other people took like the subways, and there's a lot of ways to get there. So it's just like New York. You want to explain a little bit more about how people get and do the marathon? And
so there are a number of points of entry to the start line over at Fort Wadsworth in Staten Island. You hit on most of them right there. Everything is just like in any other planning of any other major event. It's all about getting ahead as early as possible in the preparation of it, whether from a participant side, like an athlete, you're looking at your training program, you're looking at where your peaks need to be and so on and so forth in preparation for that. On the logistics and planning side, we do the same thing too. We inform the athletes of when registration for transportation is, the time slots that are available based on the waves that you are starting, because there are 5 waves for the event.
That's waves.
First, 5 ways that start off for that many people. And our pro athletes start about 8 o'clock a.m. They'll take off there with our wheelchairs and our pro women and our pro men, and then wave 1, and it goes on through. The last wave releases at 11:30 a.m. Modes of transportation there are basically you can take the subway down to the ferry, get on the assigned ferry, get to the start line to Staten Island. We'll bus you to the start line itself, and then you hang out and you're chilling. You're getting yourself prepped. There's food. There's bathrooms galore. There's things you can drink. You're stretching. You're hanging out with your fellow athletes as you get yourself prepped for it. And then once it's showtime and your corral is called, everybody starts lining up. You hear that cannon go off. You hear that New York, and you take off.
Frank Sinatra, right?
That's right.
And then the boats in the harbor are all shooting water in the air. Everyone is cheering the entire way. It's epic. I've done Berlin, Chicago, London, Boston, and New York. Tokyo is the only one left for me, but they're adding more now. So this is incredible. The running world is growing, and that's always great, I think. Health and
for sure. Absolutely.
So how fun is it to be the race director of the New York City Marathon?
I don't know if I would call it fun.
1 to 10. I would think 12 or 15 or 1,000.
It is an honor. That's it. That's truly what it is. I am the 6th race director of the TCS New York City Marathon. Fred LeBeau, Alan Seinfeld, Mary Winberg, Peter Chacha, Jim Heim, and then me. Fun fact, though, 3 of us are from the Bronx. And double fun fact, the Bronx is the home of New York Roadrunners. New York Roadrunners started and was founded in the Bronx in McCombs Dam Park. So a little tidbit there for folks. But it's truly an honor. I have the job of continuing to usher along the sport, the activity in the community, and following what was done before me while laying the groundwork for those that will be taking this over at a time. So I know that sounds like a very political answer, but it's truly an honor. One of the greatest opportunities. It's not something that I woke up every day saying, I want to be race director. I want to be race director. What I did wake up and say is, I want to love what I do. I want to enjoy the people I get to work with, and I want to be of service to the community at large. And I get to do all of that at this position as race director.
That's great. Yeah. You're a steward of this amazing organization that's global, and it's legendary in the world, along with the Boston Marathon. New York City is, everyone has to experience it who's a runner. Gives you chills.
In Boston, as a Yankee hat proudly.
I know there's a whole rivalry going on there. I have family from Boston, so I'm a little partial, but I grew up in Wisconsin, so I love them both. Honestly, I think they're both religious experiences in a sense. You just cathartic.
And you're talking about 2 of, as it relates to the majors, Boston is 140 something years old. New York is over 50 plus years old. So those events have a tremendous legacy, and they have a uniqueness about them as well.
How much work is it in a nutshell? Is it just like more work than people expect? I know there's sleepless nights.
Yeah, it's a grind. And no work is not without work. No reward, it doesn't come from just chilling and hanging out. Frankie can fully relate to this as a coach. It's not on your mark, get set, go. It's all the work leading up to that point. That's where the fruit of all the labor is all seen and done. So it is a lot of work, but I wouldn't expect it to not be. If it wasn't work, it would be hard. Everybody would do it.
Yeah, and you're doing stuff throughout the whole year to get ready for it. Obviously, it's and you have the huge amount of support from all these agencies. I know environmental awareness is important to New York City Marathon, and the RUNCenter. We have the Sneaker Impact boxes. I'll put one in a second, but tell us about Sneaker Impact. Any questions you have? I know we talked a little bit off camera about the importance of recycling your shoes. Tell us more about sustainability in New York City.
It's a pillar of our organization, and we try to be an industry leader in this space. And what's great, when you mentioned briefly Chicago and some of the other markets, we work closely with them in learning best practices. So everything from looking at compostable cups and what can be taken back to get recycled and cleaned up, all of the clothing that is off at the start line, we're able to collect that up with our partners and donate that and reuse that. But the Sneaker Impact component has been great as well, to have that at the RUNCenter there, front facing with folks with messaging and information, I think a lot of our runners are really excited to have that there, because then they know that they are contributing. There's the box right there. I see it. So it's really great to have that. I mentioned prior to me getting on the camera there, I see the box right there. My physical therapists have it at their office as well, because they service a lot of runners in the space and in the community. So it's really amazing to have that. We continue down this path of really working on having a net zero emission with the marathon and the events that we do. It's work. It's hard work. I know that Frankie had mentioned the time it's taken to get Sneaker Impact to where it is right now. But the ideal goal is for it to be at every single event, at every single race, at every single run store all over the country, so that folks are giving back products to help get recycled and reused.
That's huge. We all have an impact, ecological footprint, and when we fly and when we run. Now running shoes and companies are putting the amount of carbon and it costs to make a shoe. But like in the 80s and 90s, they weren't doing that, or 2000s. That's like new. And it's not just ESG and it's not just politics. It's reality. Is that where is the shoe material coming from? What happens to it after we're done running in it after 300 to 500 miles?
Correct.
They can live a second life. Yeah. And they can create economies. We're fortunate to work with Fleet Feet New York City. I want to give a shout out to them, to David Geddes. He's going to be on the podcast in the future. We also are at Brooklyn Running Company. Love Brooklyn Running Company, and Danielle, our contact there. And we're also at some other great locations in New York. And now we're at the RUNCenter, which we mentioned in the beginning is the New Balance Run Hub.
Yep.
How else does a New York Roadrunner support social good?
So one of the biggest things that we do along the lines of sustainability, where my colleague Ali works so hard on and making sure that it's front face at all of the events, is
shout out to Ali.
Ali's a champ. She does the good work. The other big piece too is just the community programming side of things. And I know this touches home to Frankie in particular, where we're getting our kids out there and moving. So we have our Rising New York Roadrunners program, which are free programs throughout the New York tri-state area. We also have a Rising New York Roadrunners program that are in schools across the country. But our Rising races are all free. And we serve kids from the ages of 2-year-olds to 18-year-olds that are out there doing short dashes to a mile, if not longer. We have cross-country programs. We have track programs, all of that to keep kids active and moving. The other program piece that I enjoy a lot too is our Striders program, which provides services for our seniors. Getting seniors moving, going to seniors facilities, exercise, movement, getting them out to some of our races and our events. They'll participate in events like the New Balance Fifth Avenue Mile. They'll come out and run 5Ks with us. So those components are great there. And being able to show runners firsthand what their contributions to our organization is and how it gives back and getting free program and free activities throughout the New York tri-state area.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge that you're serving so many communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one cool thing too with the sport and watching the growth of the sport is the opportunity to educate around the sport and the activity, inform people about what the sport's all about, what the distance is, how to be better prepared, how to be better trained, how to be socially responsible in what you're doing in your preparation for it. Because then it demystifies running and takes away the fear components that are there. So I think that's our responsibility in the space as well. But then they get out there and they're able to support and cheer on the pro athletes. But it's really amazing when you see the same people cheering on the pro athletes are the same people that are cheering on the kids that are out there running their first mile.
And the people that take 6 hours to do the course.
1,000%. 6 hours, 8 hours. We're out there. We show love from the first to the final.
It's indescribable when you enter Central Park for the finish line. You see it on TV, and then when you do it yourself, it just feels the biggest sporting event in the world that you're a part of it. So it's a really cool experience. I'm going to do it again. I've done about 45 marathons. New York City, I have to come back.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you, so you've done it only once. And Frankie, how many times have you done New York?
I think I've done it 3, maybe 4 times, but the most memorable thing is I got the opportunity to have Ted put my finisher medal around my neck when I crossed the lines. I got the VIP treatment.
Yeah, I was there to see him. That was a tough one, man. You crushed it though, boy. You crushed it. It's amazing.
It was 3:18. It wasn't too bad.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you have celebrities that run it as well as Frankie Ruiz in that celebrity field. You have a bunch of that was a good segue, right?
Hey, Ted comes to run our race, and we list him as a celebrity. True fact. It actually is published in the Miami Herald that we have Ted Metellus, the racer of the New York City Marathon, coming to run.
Listen, I just want to show you.
Damn. Oh,
wow.
That's a weapon. Be careful. That's a weapon.
Yes,
wow.
That's a weapon one.
I love the medals there. That's one of Frankie's babies, is having one of the most creative and amazing medals.
Oh.
And being so much love being shown when I go down to Miami and run the half every year and get out there and move. There's been years, Frankie, if you remember, I've worked like leading into the event, ran the half, came back, changed, and then was working the finish line and loading out the venue afterwards.
Wow.
I was a younger, stronger, faster Ted then.
You haven't changed too much, though, man. I think we can still use you at the start and finish.
Yeah.
I'll just run. That's it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Well, the New York City Marathon is fast approaching in early November. Ted, how are you preparing, and what are some of the cool updates this year?
So the team's getting everything set here. Right now, it's zeroed in. So when we were 200 days, a year out, you're like this. But then as you get closer and closer, you really start to zero in and really get things focused. Okay. So right now, there's a lot of meetings and engagement with our city partners and city agencies to ensure that the roads are all going to be prepped and set. Safety is obviously being monitored and paid attention here in the city. All of our participants are getting the necessary communications. Bibs are getting printed. So all of those operational components are now coming to plan. It's as we get ready for November 3rd. It's a lot of stuff. I think the last night I was up late cleaning my inbox out to make sure my inbox is clean and ready to go so that I'm ready for the next batch of emails. Just making sure people are informed and ready for what will be one of the greatest days in New York.
I love that. The TCS New York City Marathon is the best day in New York, bringing together people from all backgrounds and communities through the transformative power of running. How many countries do you have at the race, Ted?
Gosh, we have all 50 states and 150 countries, I think, that are represented. We also do a really cool thing called the Marathon Opening Ceremony, which is Celebration of Nations. So that happens Friday. So it's similar to what you may have seen at the Olympics, where there was like all of the parades and the flags and everything. We do a very similar thing in Central Park on Friday to kick off Marathon weekend.
Oh, that's cool.
It's amazing because it's comprised of the runners. So runners from different countries come in, hold their flags, celebrate, show love. I always run out when I see the Haitian team out there and folks from Haiti run in with them and cheer on with them. But it's a magical day, and it really kicks off the great weekend.
Sneaker Impact is located near Little Haiti in the Miami Little Haiti neighborhood. So next time you're in Miami, Ted, we'd love to have you come by. We've been putting a lot of heart and soul into not only building our community by going to so many marathons around the country. We're going to be at Chicago for the first time this October. Yeah, really great opportunity.
Bryan, you just mentioned something about Little Haiti. And I go back to bringing things full circle. The fact that Haitian immigrant background here, parents, and we're talking to him. He's now the race director of the New York City Marathon. But one of the things that impressed me the most when I went and saw Mo's operation, Mo is actually the founder of Sneaker Impact. But one of the cool things about the operation is that he has many Haitian business owners, micro business owners. And these business owners are basically putting their kids through college. They're using the shoes that many are going to be collected in the New York RUNCenter, New York RoadRunners RUNCenter. And those shoes end up basically in the hands of these micro business owners who take them back to their less developed countries and basically give them a whole lot of additional use. So after the runner's done with 300-400 miles of running, they probably get triple that now walking to and from school or to and from jobs. And then that micro business owner, which tie into Ted here, they're Haitian women that have been actually working with Mo for years. Basically, it ties the entire sort of ecosystem together. And I want the listeners and runners that are out there to understand that we're all connected. And Bryan mentioned that running connects us. Our shoes, in this case, connect us with the rest of the world. And pretty neat to have Ted at the top of this world right now, because we all have to start somewhere. And by just donating a pair of shoes, you end up changing somebody's trajectory in life and making things a little better for them in their home countries.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you stated that's really interesting about a second life in shoes, when you talk to many of the pro athletes that come from Africa and some of the other countries, one of the things that they do with their winnings is give it back to the community. So whether it's like shoes and clothing and things like that they're giving back to kids that are running around, because they may ultimately become the next champion in their community and whatnot. So it's amazing to be able to give back. I mean, We all know that the running community has a great bond and connection. And when there is a call to action to engage and do something as a group, they do that. We saw it after 9/11
That's
in
so
New
true.
York. We saw it after Boston in
That's
2013.
very true.
That where the community definitely comes together as one to support one another.
That's so true.
And last thing to add on connections and to New York specifically, because I find this stuff fascinating. Obviously, after COVID, we got a lot of New Yorkers that came in, but way before COVID, back in the 70s, talk about connection. Fred LeBeau actually was in touch with, and this is obviously I wasn't around, I'm not that old, but I've read and I've been told that Fred LeBeau was actually in touch with the Miami Runners Club and some of the folks attached to what was back then the Orange Bowl Marathon. And it's just pretty awesome that years later we're still getting help from New York and vice versa. Hopefully we've helped out New York. We lent Ted to you guys. But I just want to make sure that listeners out there knew that we don't forget where we came from, and we certainly don't forget those that helped us along the way. And like these shoes help other people, race directors help other races.
Absolutely. So really quickly, Frankie, when you're talking about the connections that New York and Miami have and the running community and health and wellness, I'm sure you mentioned on this pod, Rudy Garcia.
Yeah, I've met Rudy.
Rudy, actually, what's amazing, Frankie for years talked about Rudy and his influence in getting the marathon back in Miami in the meetings of the mayor and some of the city council folks and turning over and saying, wait, do we have a marathon here? We need a marathon. And then from that, Frankie, Robert, Gabby, and the rest of the team came together and brought this thing to life. Many years later, who's a staff member in New York Roadrunners working with us and helping our developmental programs for our youth, our athletes with disability youth programming. But Rudy was working at Roadrunners.
Wow. It's insane. I just, we don't have to fill in all the gaps here, but understand this, a 12-year-old out of San Bernardino, California, ends up in Miami for a few days, does a triathlon here, inspires our city to basically create a world-class marathon, leaves his mark here, moves on, becomes a famous Paralympian, and God knows all the things in between, brand ambassador to Challenge Athletes Foundation and so many awesome things. And then years later, I take my high school cross-country team to Ted's office because we were actually training at upstate New York. And guess who's there? Rudy Garcia Tolson is working for Ted the man. And that's just the more full circle than that. I just don't know what is. But one day we're going to have Ted, Rudy, and myself on a start line together.
1,000%. Preferably a 5K, because no matter, and then if you want to put money on the table, it's between you and Rudy to see who's going to win. Because I'm not.
No, Rudy's legit. Rudy's legit.
We didn't get too much into your running background, Ted. Is there anything you want to share with us about? I know you said in high school and college. What are some of your favorite memories as a runner?
I still get out and run. I still get out and hammer, relatively speaking. I've run 2 marathons. I've run New York twice, and I've run 44 half marathons. The half marathon distance is a very comfortable distance for me. It always keeps me at a base fitness-wise. I was actually talking to one of our dear colleagues on my team, Stu, and he's looking to run a half, and I'm sharing with him a bunch of ideas. And we actually talked about the Miami Marathon potentially as a half for him to run. I love it. It's great. I enjoy being able to pick up and travel to some of the races, especially races that I really enjoy the experience in. So Miami is one of those races. Philadelphia, half I've run a ton of times. I enjoy that. I'm a creature of habit when it comes down to that because you know what you like and you enjoy there. Yeah, that's it. I try to get out 3-4 days a week. I'm not like Frankie who runs every single day because I alternate with hitting the gym and doing some other stuff. I ran this morning. And what I've realized, and we can all relate to, and you mentioned, Frankie, briefly about COVID, that running has been, it's the best outlet in many ways to clear your mind, to settle your heart, to get yourself steady in one space. And it's all about movement. I tell a lot of people that are running for the first time, don't run on distance, run on time. Get out there and say, I'm going to run for 3 minutes and then I'm going to walk. I'm going to run for 5 minutes and I'm going to walk. And you build until you're able to run for 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 14 minutes, and 30 minutes and on. So yeah, that's running is, I love it. I'm blessed. I enjoy it. There's nothing that I enjoy more. I'm sure you guys can relate to this, Frank, in particular, is seeing other people running. Like when you're there, you're seeing somebody running, you're like, keep doing it. Like that's what we want to see. I spend my time sometimes at home watching, running videos, running programs, looking at some of the influencers talk about their journeys and their experiences, because it gives me an opportunity to see what I don't get to see, particularly with my races and our events, but then other races and other events as well.
Sure.
No,
Yeah,
that's
I
what's
get it.
awesome. I think, Ted, you get it. Running, having more than a moment right now, and having you at the helm of that race, just and actually engaged in the moment and understanding how it's evolving and understanding where running is headed, because you're a runner and because you're paying attention, I think is going to benefit us all. If it was just a race director who was into the technical side and worried more about water stations and things like that, which are extraordinarily important, and not paying attention to the industry as a whole or as a sport, we wouldn't be well served. So let's consider Ted for like race director of the world.
I don't want that responsibility, bro. I got enough for 53,000
There
people
you go.
in one of the biggest cities in the world.
That's a good question that Frankie brought up, though, is how the sport's been changing, but still staying the same. What do you think, Ted, the New York City Marathon will look like? This is Frankie's actually inspired question. What will the New York City Marathon and other global events look like in 50 years?
Wow.
Let's use this to wrap up also, because I know Ted's got to.
Yeah, we only have 2 minutes left. I have 2 more quick questions, but this is one of the big questions we had for you.
What do I see? I continue to see the sport evolving. I continue to see the face of the sport evolving. I continue to see more types of people running and being active of all shapes, sizes, abilities, skills, and becoming more engaged in that space. Mm-hmm. I think the last thing I'll say too is people being better prepared and more informed when they're getting out there and running with like wearable tech and information, the fact that people can communicate and share training practices and learnings of different things with different ways to hydrate and keep nutrition and everything. I think that will continue to grow the sport. And that's where I see us as being better, stronger, more diverse participants in the world.
Awesome. Your favorite mile of the New York City Marathon, if you have one?
Oh man, my favorite.
There's 5 of them.
I know. Listen, I'm gonna give the right answer, which is the Bronx. It's where I was born and raised in. It's where New York Road Runners was founded. So that's definitely it. It's also mile 20, the wall. So if you can make it there, you could definitely make it anywhere. So that is for sure the mile that I'll call out. But there's sections in Brooklyn that are unbelievable. The energy there is insane. Queens is incredible. Staten Island, where it all starts, is great. That finish line is epic because, like, from the first to the final, you'll always feel that energy.
The crowd, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Lining it for the whole course, basically. The only quiet space is the Queensboro Bridge, really.
Correct. The bridges are the only quiet part. And even then, it's beautiful because it resets you and all you hear is the your feet.
Ted, thank you so much for your time today. Frankie, thank you so much. This is incredible. I have one last question. Ted, and then Frankie, you as well, if you have any closing thoughts. But Ted, what is an inspiring message you'd like to leave the Sneaker Impact audience with?
Very simple. The shirt says New York Energy, but I'm a big believer in the energy you give is the energy you receive. The energy you give is the energy you receive. So give good energy, give positive energy, lift people up because they'll give that back or they'll give it to someone else that needs that. So be good stewards of the sport and the activity of running. Be good stewards in the world and being able to give back, but give good energy.
That's very powerful. Frankie?
I can't say too much more. I'm just going to thank Ted. I'm going to thank Ted for doing what he did to Miami and for what he's doing for the sport and definitely what he's doing at the youth level, at all levels. It's just, we can't thank you enough. I know it's a job, but it's not. It's more than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Community. Yeah, Ted, this was incredible. An honor for me as a runner who's run New York City to meet you and interview you. And we wish you the best with New York City. I'm going to pledge to come run it next year.
Excellent.
I'm running Boston. And
Bryan was starstruck, man. Bryan was starstruck. We're going to have a New York race
I've been telling my friends all week I'm interviewing the New York City Marathon race director. This is the biggest interview of my life, but I wanted to relax and just.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you to the Sneaker Impact community, Mo and everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really happy that there's the partnership at New York Road Runners and the running community at large doing good in the world. So I will be in South Florida. I usually go down there after the marathon and recharge my batteries, but I'll be back again to run. So the race is going to be early February this year. So if you haven't registered, I'm sorry, but the waiting list is live. So you go on there. There's a little plug for Frankie. But as far as New York Road Runners, for more information about our programming and activities, definitely go online to NYRR.org, NYRRRunners.org, for more information about our programming, activities, becoming a member, getting your kids as part of the Rising New York Road Runners programs, and so on. Thank you guys so very much.
100%. Ted, thank you so much for the work you're doing in the world. We're going to share all those links in the description. Frankie, last words?
Don't stop. That's it.
That's it.
Love it. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Ted. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.